The air inside the room was dry and humming, that peculiar scent of warmed circuitry and coffee gone cold. It was late evening, somewhere in California, and the desert light outside the window had already dissolved into the soft blue of night. The date was October 29th, 1969. Inside the small laboratory at UCLA, a handful of people were awake at an hour when most of the campus slept. That is when I arrived. No flash, no noise. I never make one. I simply am, wherever the hinge of history decides to turn. The world does not see me, but I see it. And that night, it looked like a modest room full of wires and possibilities. The hum of the machines greeted me first, the refrigerator-sized computers breathing softly through vents. There was the faint clicking of relays, the whir of tape reels turning like watchful eyes, and the soft scratch of a pencil on a pad. The air smelled faintly metallic, tinged with solder and dust. Someone had spittled coffee onto a stack of paper printouts, the edge curled like a scorched leaf. There were only 4 of them here, 4 human beings, and one machine that would change everything. A young man with dark hair, Leonard Kleinrock, sat near a teletype terminal, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled. He had the kind of intensity that belonged to people who half live inside their own ideas. Next to him, a student named Charlie Klein, tall, restless, biting at a pencil as he stared at the terminal. Another student stood behind him, holding a notebook. And on the phone, connected by the taut copper coil of the handset, was a voice from Stanford Research Institute, 350 miles north, another young man, Bill Duval. Their words were clipped, cautious, almost reverent. This was no mere experiment, though they did not yet know what it would become. They were about to connect 2 computers across a distance, sending a message from one to another through a network they called ARPANET. They were about to make the first heartbeat of the Internet. I watched the light of the terminal flicker to life. The screen glowed a soft green, a ghostly square of light in the darkness of the room. Charlie typed L. He spoke quietly into the phone. "Did you get the L?" "Yes," came the reply. He typed again, O. "Got the O." Then, before he could finish typing the word login, the system crashed. The room went silent. Not disappointed, just stunned. Machines had failed before. It was nothing new. But something lingered in the air, like the pause before the first breath of a song. They laughed softly, the sound of fatigue and wonder mixing together. "Well," someone said, "at least we sent something." And they had. 2 letters carried across the miles. L and O. Lo. Like the beginning of a greeting. Lo, an old word, meaning behold. It felt almost poetic, though none of them noticed it. I did. It was as if the world had whispered its own awakening. Lo, behold, something new has begun. She would never know that her father had been only a few doors away from the night everything began. That is how history moves, quietly, through the hands of those who do not know they are part of it. There was a phone ringing faintly somewhere in the building. A printer sputtered and coughed paper, and I felt the pulse of the new network like a heartbeat under the world, faint, electric, insistent. I thought of how it would grow, this web of invisible threads, carrying human voices farther than any empire or religion or invention before it. I thought of how it would connect lovers across oceans, reunite families, ignite revolutions, and how, too, it would wound, spreading lies, loneliness, noise. Every invention is a mirror, and the internet, I knew, would be the clearest one of all. I stepped outside as the first students began to walk across campus. Their breath made small clouds in the cool morning air. Some carried books on programming, some poetry, some protest leaflets for the anti-war rally that weekend. They did not yet know that the same wires running beneath their feet would one day carry every poem, every protest, every whisper. I paused near the steps, watching the sunlight strike the windows of Bolter Hall. It glinted like a signal, faint, fleeting, infinite. And I wondered, if the internet could speak, if it could look back upon its own birth, what would it say? Would it remember the laughter of tired engineers, the smell of burnt coffee, the two letters, L and O, like the first syllables of a name it hadn't yet learned to pronounce? I think it might, because the internet, for all its vast machinery, began with something profoundly human, the desire to reach out, to send a message, to connect. And that desire is older than language itself. I walked down the quiet streets of Los Angeles, the city waking around me. A delivery truck rattled by. A paperboy pedaled through the mist. The air filled with the scent of orange blossoms and exhaust. Somewhere, a radio host read the morning news, stories of protests, of astronauts, of music. Nothing yet about the message sent last night. But someday I knew this would be remembered. Not as a headline, but as a heartbeat. The day the world said, "Lo, behold." I drifted then, as I always do, away from the edges of that moment. The air shimmered, and time loosened around me like fabric. As I left, I could still hear the faint hum of the terminal, the echo of those first keystrokes. And in that sound, two letters, two breaths, I could hear the future speaking softly to itself. It was not the sound of machines. It was the sound of people reaching out across the dark, saying to each other, "I am here. Are you there?" And the world, for the first time, began to answer back.